Am I biting off more than I can chew? Am I diving into the deep end? Or am I just kicking a hornet's nest? Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is the second video in a series that I'm doing about books that I want to reread. I like rereading books a lot, sometimes more than discovering new books, because as I age, I am discovering fewer and fewer new books that really intrigue me. So this is my goal for the end of 2024 and into 2025, and probably part of 2026 too, is to create a list of books that I think are fascinating, that I want to reread. Now, this is divided up into science fiction, fiction, translated literature, horror, mystery, and nonfiction. If you are an astute observer of my previous video, you've noticed that I've added two categories since then. That is translated fiction and nonfiction. I did that because when I was working for my fiction, it was originally mixed with translated works and works originally written in English, and I just could not bring it down to 12. So I doubled it, and I think it'll be a better list. So this is my list of 12 works of fiction that I want to reread. I am not saying that these books are the best 12 novels ever written. Some of them certainly would not fit that category, but they are novels, for whatever reason, my mind is drawn to, and I want to revisit it. And if you have not read any of these books before, I think they are a good choice, at least initially. After I reread them, maybe my opinion will change. The first book on the list is Call It Sleep by Henry Roth, originally published in 1934. It is the story of a young Jewish immigrant boy growing up in New York City. Critics called this novel a little reminiscent of James Joyce because it is a modernist novel. And I read this in the 90s, and I've been drawn to it. I want to revisit it. And this author is kind of unique. This was his only novel that he published for 60 years. Yes, it took him 60 years to publish his second work. And that may be the record for writer's block. But I want to revisit this tale of Jewish immigrants in New York City. The Third Policeman by Flann O'Brien. It was originally written around 1939 or 1940, but did not get published until the mid-60s. It is the story of an unnamed amateur scholar who is studying the scientist and philosopher. When he was a young boy, he had an accident, or an accident happened to him where he lost a leg and it was replaced by a wooden leg. And it is the story of this boy growing into manhood and his exploration of this scientist. It is also an experimental work. There are footnotes to this novel, and not many novels have footnotes. And again, it was set in rural Ireland. Lolita by Valdimir Nabokov, originally published in 1955. This is a very notorious novel. It is the story of a French literature professor who moves to the United States. And he has this predilection for women, or should we say girls, of about 12 years old. He is sexually attracted to them. This, of course, raised a hue and cry when it was originally published. It was originally published by Olympia Press, which published pornographic literature. However, Lolita is not a sex novel. There's very little graphic sexual detail in this book, but the subject matter is so notorious and so disturbing to some people that I've seen people on BookTube saying this is the book that they can never read because they will find it so disturbing. And yes, the narrator, Humbert, he's a wicked man, but he's supposed to be wicked. You're not supposed to think he's a good character, and you are not supposed to say that his sexual desires for underage women is correct. But this is perhaps one of the most exquisitely written novels in the English language, and it is Nabokov's third language. And if my friend, who is a Russian, is correct, his mastery of the Russian language is equal to his mastery of the English language. And Nabokov originally published his first few books in Russian. I think this is a masterwork of American literature. And please do not be put off by this book by its subject matter. It is fantastic. It is great. And I think everyone should read it and understand that a man like Humbert can be wicked, and a reader does not have to sympathize with him for his wickedness. Stoner by John Williams, published in 1966. This is the story of an undistinguished man named William Stoner. As a young man, he went off to college to study agriculture, as he was going to take over his father's farm. But he fell in love with literature and became a literature professor. And this book is the story of his life. It is very quiet, and it describes a life, as I said, of an undistinguished man, absolutely perfectly. And it's something that I want to revisit. I have read other books by John Williams, especially Butcher's Crossing, which I have reread a few times, but I've only read this book once before. The Fixer by Bernard Malamud, published in 1966. This is a fictionalized account of an actual story that occurred in Tsarist Russia early in the 1900s. A Jewish man was accused of murdering a boy. He was eventually acquitted, and it caused a bit of an uproar. I became fascinated with this book again after reading Malamud's first novel, The Natural, which was a baseball story. But this is more in line with what Malamud is known for, which is the Jewish characters. So I want to pick this up again. The Unfortunates by B.S. Johnson, published in 1969. This is known as the novel in a box. It comes in 27 parts. And if you open up this box and take a look inside, you will see 27 pamphlets. And you can read these pamphlets in any order, except that you're supposed to read the first pamphlet first and the last pamphlet last. But other than that, you can read them in any order that you want to. Highly experimental. I'm trying to remember the story. I kind of remember it tells about a sports writer in England and his dealings with life. But just the whole idea of the order of the book not making a difference. I want to see how it works out. I actually have a list of the last time I read it, that the order that I read them in. So I will read them in a different order this time and see if my opinion of the book changes. Royal Flash by George MacDonald Fraser, the second in the Flashman series. I have been bantering around rereading Flashman for a very long time. When I started my BookTube channel a little over 3 years ago, I said I was going to read the whole series. I reread the first book and never got around to reading the rest. This is the story of Flashman, a notorious Victorian man who is rather a bit of a scoundrel. He is a coward. He is a cheat. He will throw women to the wolves to save himself. That's the kind of character he is. It is absolutely hilarious. And if I am not completely mistaken, a lot of people say that Fraser is actually a very good historical novelist, and he gets his details and facts right as an historical novelist. This, as I said, the second in the series, where it basically retells the story of Anthony Hope's The Prisoner of Zenda, where Flashman has to impersonate some other royal person of a fictionalized country. I don't remember much else about this book, but I'm so eager to pick up Flashman again, and maybe other people want to read Flashman too, because Flashman is a character you're going to love to dislike. Love in the Ruins by Walker Percy, published in 1971. The subtitle of this novel is The Adventures of a Bad Catholic at a Time Near the End of the World. This is the story of the United States in decline. I guess it's a little bit of a science fiction, but not the kind of science fiction that science fiction fans would want to read. As I said, it is the story of the United States in decay. People just leave their cars all over the place because people have forgotten how to fix them. And there is this psychologist. He is named Dr. Tom Moore, who invents a device to plummet the depths of the human soul. Walker Percy was called a Catholic existentialist novel. I am not a Catholic. I am nominally an existentialist. I probably read this book in the late 80s. I don't remember a lot about it. I am still sort of an existentialist. I am not a Catholic by any sense of the mean, but I want to visit this book. Walker Percy was once a very highly respected novelist, and he's essentially fallen by the wayside. His novel, The Moviegoer, is still occasionally read, but he's one of those novelists that have just fallen off the face of the earth. So I'm going to pick it up again and see what I think. The Architecture of the Arkansas Ozarks by Donald Harington, published in 1975. I am pretty sure very few people on BookTube, YouTube, have read a book by Donald Harington. He was never a great critical success. He was an art history professor who got a job teaching in Arkansas, and he fell in love with the state and the history. And he wrote a number of books about a town called Stay More. And it covers a lot of history about Arkansas. And this book is told from 6 generations. And it is about the early lives in the Arkansas and moving up to the mid and early 70s. I think Harington was a fabulous author. Only Steve Donahue has probably read a book by him that I know about. And Harington had this very unusual style. At the very last chapter, he would usually switch from past tense to future tense. And the first time you read that, it's really rather bizarre. It's more of just a writing quirk. but I still love the way he wrote. I love that he found a home in this state that he was not native to. Now, I have never been to Arkansas, and in all honesty, I probably never will go to Arkansas. But the history of Arkansas described in Harington's novels is utterly fascinating. A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving, published in 1989. It is the story of two boys growing up in a small town in New Hampshire during the 50s and 60s. John Wheelwright and Owen Meany. Owen Meany thinks he is destined by God to do a great thing. And it is the story of these two boys' friendship. And it goes into the Vietnam War era. And Owen Meany is just a unique character in literature. When you read this book, all dialogue from Owen Meany is all caps. And it is a very strange and jarring thing to read, because all caps is not something that you normally encounter in a book. And the story of these two boys is utterly fascinating. I have read this book twice before, and this will be my third go at it. I also recently learned that A Prayer for Owen Meany is an homage from John Irving to Günter Grass's novel The Tin Drum. I never knew that. We'll see if I can find out a little more about the homage on this reread. Fathers and Crows by William T. Vollmann, published in 1992. William T. Vollmann is perhaps one of the most talented American writers living today. He does not get a lot of recognition. This is an historical novel in his Seven Dreams cycle. It is volume number 2, but these volumes are not really connected story-wise. They are just connected thematically, and the theme of the Seven Dreams are Europeans encountering Native Americans. And in this story, it is the story of the Jesuits meeting the Iroquois Indians in the territory known as New France back then, which today is Canada. And neither the Indians nor the Jesuits come out smelling like roses in this book, although Vollmann is definitely on the side of the Indians. He, as he said, they got the short shaft when the Europeans came to the United States. And this is a massive novel. It is 900 pages long. The text is going to challenge my poor eyes. This is not available in audio. This is not available digital. So I have to read the physical book. I'll be getting out my glasses. And Vollmann has a very unique, dense postmodernist style. He tells a lot of diverging stories in these books to prove a point. And I just want to read the dedication of this book because it shows you a little bit of what William T. Vollmann is like as an author. I will show you the text, and I'll just read it. The dedication has 2 parts, to and against. This book is dedicated to all Canadians, past, present, Jesuit and Iroquois, Huron, French, Algonquin, English, Montagnais, Nimiq, Inuit, and others. May they preserve their land together. This book is dedicated against all dogmatists and their armies, in which some of them above may have enlisted. Whoever they are, I cordially wish them a warm stay in hell. Vollmann does not like dogmatists, and this book can absolutely prove it. I would wish more people pick up this book and read it, but it will challenge you. You have to set out a long time to read this book. I remember when I read this in the 90s, I took a week off work. I was going to write or try to write a novel, and I abandoned that novel writing, and I just read this book. It took me essentially all week of not working and just reading to get through this book. But man, is it a fascinating novel. Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon, published 2006. I am including this book because my friend Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics says this is his favorite novel of Thomas Pynchon and maybe his favorite novel of all time. It is an historical novel, kind of, if I'm looking at my notes correctly. It starts off right after 1893 and goes just after World War I. And there are some fantastical elements to this. There is a blimp that people travel in. And this blimp kind of travels places where you normally would not think blimps travel. I did listen to the audiobook early aughts, shortly after this book was published. So we're doing this as a buddy read in December. And if you want to join Alan and join me in reading Against the Day, we should be reading this in December of 2024. It's big. Alan says it reads really quick. I just listened to the audiobook, so I'm not too familiar on how quick it will read. But this book is 1,082 pages long, so it will be a commitment. Okay, that is my rereading plans for fiction. I kind of hope to have this done by the end of 2025, but realistically, it's going to stretch into 2026. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.